Good day, guys, and welcome to our latest weekly wrap from Rand Swiss. As usual, we'll go over what happened this week and how it affects your investments. The big news of the week, of course, is the ECB held pat for this month, but going to be raising from next month onwards. Also going to be cutting off some of that spending and quantitative easing. The ECB also basically cut down forecasts for growth for the Eurozone for this year. This had been anticipated. We are seeing central banks coming to the realization that inflation is not transitory at the moment, but we are seeing some real inflationary pressures, and action has to be done to translate what is basically possibly permanent inflation back into transitory and back into the inflation targeting levels. For those that don't know, the way modern central banks work is they work on what's called inflation expectations. They want to build an expectation for inflation into their system. The idea being that one of the reasons that inflation increases over time is that people build up the expectation that inflation is going to be high. And so when they ask for price increases or wage increases into the future, they're budgeting on the idea that there's going to be this inflation inbuilt in the system. So if you think inflation is going to be 10% a year, when you go to your boss and ask for a wage increase, you're asking for at least 10% just to stay flat. And in fact, you're probably going to ask for a bit extra than that. The boss, basically assuming inflation is 10%, then you're going to come and ask him for another 10%, is also going to be looking at raising his prices by at least 10% the next year, because he thinks his costs are going to go up by 10%. And what happens in that system is you get into a little cycle in which kind of inflation expectations kind of turn expectations into reality. And what central banks have decided to do over the last last few decades, is kind of like anchor expectations. What they do is they go out and say, if inflation ever gets beyond our target for a period of time, we're going to come in and we're going to make sure inflation gets back to that target. By doing that, what they're doing is basically threatening the market to say, we think that you will act in a way that's going to make sure inflation stays at our target level, and if you don't, we'll make sure that you act in that way. So if you start spending too much, if you start building in these expectations into your system, we're going to come in and raise interest rates, even if it forces a downturn, to make sure inflation stays at our target level. And this kind of like works like a threat. A great thing about a threat is often you don't have to do anything to make the threat work. You just basically say, you try and push inflation above 6%, we will make sure it comes back down. If the market trusts you, if the country trusts you, they won't be building expectations more than that level. The ECB, for instance, is about 2%. Same thing in the US. And they've been really successful working on this for quite some time. Unfortunately, for the last couple of years, we've seen inflation breach these numbers and breach them for a while. The way the ECB and the Fed, etc., have gotten away with it until now is we're talking about the fact that it's transitory. This is a once-off blip. It's not a real inflation. So you don't build your expectations around this inflation number. Don't try and get wage increases of 8% above. Don't try and put in price increases of about 8% and above, because this is transitory. It's going to disappear over time, and you'll basically be making a loss after that period of time, because you've had budgeted for this massive inflation that does not exist. Unfortunately, they've been proven to be wrong. And now basically the populations are losing faith in their ability to bring inflation down. What do they have to do in that circumstance? They have to go and do the actions that they threatened to do if inflation ever got out of track. One of those actions is raise interest rates, even if it causes the economy to slow down significantly, it may cause unemployment to increase in order to bring prices down. And that's what's happening right now. We are seeing these central banks basically acting in a way that's going to be raising interest rates, decreasing money supply in order to slow down the economy, to increase things like unemployment, to increase things like excess capacity in the system, in order to drop down economic growth, in order to make inflation go back to the level that they said is their target. Okay. Now, to give you an idea as to how bad this can be, the last time inflation really got out of control in the US was the early 80s, late 70s. At that point in time, Paul Volcker comes in and effectively causes two really close together recessions in the US. Significant jump up in unemployment, significant pullback in economic growth. The first time he did it, he didn't keep the interest rates high enough, long enough, and brought them down quite soon thereafter. And that caused basically inflation to not really respond. The second time he did it was much slower time in which inflation came down. Interest rates came down, and therefore inflation responded. And we kind of lived in that environment for the last 40 years or so, where we've kind of not had to worry about inflation because of this one threat. It's like, somebody comes and messes with you, threatened, and you do an action that's so severe that, they don't want to, incur that action again, so they don't try it again. Same thing happened here. Inflation threatened, the action was severe enough that you basically remove the threat of inflation for a number of years, and you don't actually have to do much around that in order to keep that threat on the go, because the idea here is that the threat of high interest rates, the threat of action by the central bank, would keep inflation expectations under or at the target level. Okay, that's it for me this week. Look forward to again to seeing you guys next week, and I think next week's also, no, it's not, the week after is a public holiday. But anyway, have a great week, and we'll chat again.